On this edition of the program, my notes on the Kamala Harris-Tim Walz CNN interview and the triumphant return of Musa Al-Gharbi to the program. Got a new book coming out. It's all coming up. This episode of Politics is brought to you by Kalshi, where there is a market for everything and you can take advantage of your knowledge. Why be right for free? On Kalshi, there's a market for everything, and I want to show you one that I am very interested in, and that is how many presidential debates this year. Only on Kalshi is it legal for you to put money into this market and win money back. So the Kalshi market right now is absolutely split on this. 45% of the market believes that there will only be two debates, the debate that's already happened and the one that will happen on September 10th. And 45% believe that there will be a third debate added. Meanwhile, if you want to go really galaxy brain, you can make a lot of money by taking the position that only 5% of the market has taken, saying that there will only be one debate. That means the September 10th debate is going to fall apart. And by the way, it almost did this week. So that 5% might have looked really, really, really good. Head on over there right now. Kalshi.com. That is KALSHI.com/PX3. We are giving a $20 bonus for the first 500 people who join when you go to that link and deposit $100. Again, KALSHI.com/PX3. Thank you to Kalshi for supporting independent political journalism. Hello and welcome everybody to the Politics program for August 30th, 2024. Your old pal Justin Robert Young joining you right before Labor Day weekend. I hope everybody has a really good time, maybe a little vacation. Shout out to all my people that are going to Dragon Con. You know that's where we love to be, but we're not going to be there this year because, as I mentioned last Friday, that was the last episode that you were going to see me not being a father. And indeed, my daughter, Bella, born this week on Monday morning at 1:20. She didn't make it the weekend before started knocking on the door to get out and join everybody. Mom and baby are healthy and happy. We are back home out of the hospital. I gotta say, it has been an extraordinary journey, and we'll see where my schedule is with the show going forward. Like I said last Friday, I think the best way to judge it is that I will likely be at a one free episode a week schedule, but you never know. We are still figuring out the baseline here, and right now I feel good. Although yesterday, because of the irregular sleep schedule, I did take a nap that felt like I got mugged. I don't know if you've ever done that, where you take a nap and I guess like you're just woken up out of the wrong sleep cycle. And I just felt like I was on Mars. So other than that, everything has gone swimmingly so far, including my ability to watch the CNN interview with Kamala Harris and Tim Walz last night. Quick top line thoughts, because I don't really think that this is the biggest story on the planet. I don't think it's really going to affect much, but I said for the patrons yesterday that I wasn't really watching this for any kind of oops, gotcha kind of moments. I was mostly looking at this from a temperament perspective, how the Harris campaign was planning on prepping her, they had a long time to think about how to deal with issues that were there. How do they want to get through them? And I laid out that I felt no matter what, this was not going to be the best interview for them just because they had waited so long on it. And I want to go through this right now. These are just the first 6 questions that were asked by Dana Bash of CNN last night. All right. Now, I didn't include follow-ups to those questions. These were different topics that were brought up. So these are just the first 6. What would you do day one? What do you say to Americans who are nostalgic for Trump's economy? Why haven't you already done what you are campaigning on, considering your party is in office right now? And then there was a follow-up on whether or not she still backs Bidenomics. 4, why did you reverse your position on fracking? So we get into the 2019 stuff. Several follow-ups for clarity. And a big option to leave open. In fact, she prompted Kamala Harris to, hey, give us an example of you seeing new data or something like that. She didn't take it. Why is the border bad? And what have you done in your position with the root causes of migration? Several follow-ups. And then 6, why should voters believe what you are saying now? None of those were phrased super negatively. You know, if she were on Hannity, the question would be, why are you lying and why are you going to continue to lie? These were delivered in a manner that CNN wants to remain accessible with the Harris campaign. So they're not going to torture. But these are a lot of questions that could have been spread out over 3 interviews. The first question that Kamala Harris would have gotten if she would have done an interview within 2 weeks of getting the nomination is the questions that she got at the end of this interview. How did you feel in this moment in history? Instead, you've let pile up a bunch of stuff that now she has to deal with. And so because of that, because you've delayed it for so long, there's just gonna be more eyes on it, and there's going to be more eyes on how you answer stuff. I don't particularly think she had great answers. Here was one of those examples, fracking. So she was very strident, saying that she did not reverse her fracking position now. She reversed her fracking position in 2020. So the way that she said it was, I made my position on fracking clear on the debate stage in 2020. Real heads know she was not on a primary debate stage in 2019 because her campaign ended before New Year's Eve. She was on a debate stage with Mike Pence for the vice presidential debate. And here is what she said then. Joe Biden will not raise taxes on anyone who makes less than $400,000 a year. He has been very clear about that. Joe Biden will not end fracking. He has been very clear on that. She is now saying that is her reversing her fracking opinion to say that Joe Biden won't do it. And it gets into this very pliant relationship that the Harris campaign has with the last 4 years, where they are simultaneously both very connected to it and not connected to it at all. So this is an example of her being very connected to Joe Biden. Joe Biden changed his mind, so I changed my mind. That didn't happen now. That happened in 2020. And that's what we're supposed to take from her saying, I made my opinions on fracking clear on the debate stage in 2020. There's only one time that happened. And this is the only quote that it references to it. Here's the other thing that I have questions on. And I don't blame them for this, by the way. The catchphrase was, my values haven't changed. So obviously she is moonwalking away from a lot of positions that she took as a presidential candidate in 2019. Among them, fracking, mandatory gun buyback, which didn't even get asked about, and decriminalizing the border. She did get asked about that. My values haven't changed. Now, look, the campaign has to just put a Band-Aid on it. They're not going to win on it. There's nobody who's going to be thrilled that Kamala Harris had a bunch of very different positions, and now she has a bunch of very different positions now. So you got to do your best to just, tie a stick around it and hope that it holds until the election. So I'm not going to really slam them on it. I will just say that it's easy to poke holes in. So my values haven't changed. Just the positions that I'm taking that will affect your life. But trust me, internally, I'm the same person. I just will do radically different things that actually affect you. But hopefully you sleep well knowing that I haven't changed. When I look into the mirror, I still see Kamala Harris. Or, and this is probably a little bit more honest, my values haven't changed. I wanted to be president then, so I said things that the polls told me I should say. And I want to be president now, so I'm saying things the polls are telling me that I should say. My values of wanting to be president desperately are consistent throughout. And then there was this, and I'm going to assume, we're going to talk about it a little bit more with Musa Al-Gharbi, but I assume that this was focus tested on some level, but I'm just going to read this verbatim. Harris, I am proud to be running with Tim Walz for president of the United States and to bring America what I believe the American people deserve, which is a new way forward, turning the page on the last decade of what I believe has been contrary to where the spirit of our country really lies. Bash. With the last decade, of course, the last 3.5 years has been part of your administration. Harris, I'm talking about the era that started about a decade ago, where there are some suggestions, warped, I believe it to be, that the measure of strength of a leader is based on who you beat down instead of where I believe most Americans are, which is to believe that the true measure of strength of a leader is based on who you lift up. That's what's at stake as much as any other detail that we can discuss in this election. I have to imagine that the decade number is something that they went over. I don't particularly see the logic. A decade ago, Obama was still president. So were you saying Obama started in the midterms of his final term in office, an era where you beat people down? Then Donald Trump took advantage of that. Then Joe Biden took advantage of that. And now you're going to change it? Are you making Barack Obama, Donald Trump, and Joe Biden complicit in this toxic culture that you are the antidote to? I get what they're going for, which is she is a breath of fresh air. She is a Democrat who is not a Democrat that you have known before. She represents change. And if that's the case, then you got to start the clock somewhere. And you can't start it with just when Donald Trump came in, because Joe Biden came in after that and you guys didn't do anything. So 10 years, I guess, is just a round number. The only thing is that she doesn't have a history of turning the page. In fact, when people liked her the most, she was one of the chief inquisitors of beating people down. At the Democratic National Convention, they repeatedly played these sizzle reels of her being very pointed during judiciary hearings and confirmation hearings. She is the prosecutor. She is not the let's all hold hands and turn the page. So I don't know if it really fits her strengths. If there's a messaging thing that I would worry about, it's stuff like that. But again, it is a sign that this is not a specifically busy week in politics, that this became what it was. I do think that they made a mistake by not just having her on Joy Reid 3 days after she got the nomination so she could be slobbered over and they could laugh together. But here we are. There we go. Harris-Tim Walz on CNN. After the break, Musa Al-Gharbi. This is your update brought to you by TakePoliticsSeriously.com. Head on over to TakePoliticsSeriously.com if you want to get 2 bonus episodes each and every week. We are going through a little bit of a adjustment as I adjust to the new baby when it comes to the free feed. But the Patreon feed, hell or high water, I'm doing those. We are here in the first couple days. I'm getting a sense of how much time I got, but I can always do the Patreon. And so head on over there right now. If you want 2 bonus episodes each and every week, It's only $3. So for the price of a cup of coffee, you can go ahead and get 2 bonus episodes. And these days, oh brother, these days, take politics seriously.com. And a meaty update as we are, down to 1 episode here. Donald Trump expressed disagreement with Florida's 6-week abortion ban and seemingly supported a referendum that would reverse it, saying that 6 weeks is too short. He then, on Friday, just before I recorded this, said he will vote against it. In the interview Thursday, Trump hinted at saying that it was too restrictive and now has clarified his position. Trump emphasized that 6 weeks is an insufficient amount of time for an abortion ban, but did not explicitly state his stance initially. His comments reflect an effort to moderate his position on abortion, a contentious issue since the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. Trump's stance could influence the amendment for vote in Florida. Meanwhile, he has pledged to make in vitro fertilization treatment free this week, although specifics not provided. So let's get into the Trump of it all. I haven't talked a lot about Trump in the intro because we talked a lot about Harris-Tim Walz. First things first, the 5D chess. Is this Donald Trump saying something to re-inject himself into the news cycle? Quite possibly. But I will, in general, defer to the idea that Donald Trump is not every moment thinking about the calculations of how he's going to get into the news cycle and short circuit his opponents. In general, he just constantly throws a lot of stuff at the wall and sees what people are responding to. With that being said, Donald Trump has been trying to moderate his abortion stance since 2022, since Roe versus Wade fell. He was critical of candidates in the midterms who left any room open for the idea that the exceptions, rape, incest, and life of the mother, would not be respected. And judging on a curve for other Republican candidates, for every Republican candidate since I was born in 1983, he is the most moderate. He has said the most moderate things. He has adjusted his platform to say the most moderate things. That being said, he's Donald Trump. And so his opponents in the Democratic Party will say, you can't believe a word he says because he's a liar. Salt to taste, however you want on that. Do you believe what Trump is saying? Do you believe that he cannot be trusted and therefore Project 2025 is his real heart? And in his real heart, IVF is banned and abortion is banned nationwide. And we are living in a Handmaid's Tale society where women are tracked when they go across state lines, yada, yada, yada. We're going to talk a little bit more on this with Musa Al-Gharbi, so I will leave that for that conversation. But it is fascinating that we live in a reality where both Donald Trump wants to pay for IVF. Pay for IVF. So now if you are trying to conceive and you can't, you can now apply for government IVF. The Republican wants that. Or he wants to ban it forever. I mean, oh, what a world. Another story that popped up this week, an altercation at the Arlington National Ceremony during a wreath-laying ceremony honoring service members killed in the Afghanistan war withdrawal. The Trump campaign had been warned to not take photographs in Section 60, where military personnel from Afghanistan and Iraq are buried. Despite the warning, 2 Trump staff members allegedly pushed aside a cemetery official who tried to stop them from filming. Trump's campaign has denied the allegation, claiming that they had permission for a photographer by one of the families that they were invited to the cemetery with and the incident involved an individual, quote, suffering a mental health episode, unquote. Cemetery officials confirmed that an incident did occur and filed a report, but provided no further details. The incident has drawn criticism from various quarters, including the Democratic Representative Jerry Connolly, who condemned Trump and his campaign's behavior as abhorrent and shameful. Meanwhile, Trump's running mate, J.D. Vance, downplayed the incident, shifting the focus to the Afghanistan withdrawal. Specifically, the families that Trump was there with were the Gold Star families, meaning that their family members were killed in a suicide bombing during the hectic Afghanistan withdrawal. I'll leave it up to you how much this matters. I just think it's crazy that we live in a world where MSNBC that's the channel that's thumping this political candidate doesn't respect the military enough. We've just come a long way, is all I'm saying. Will we please think about the honor and dignity of the military? For somebody who grew up during the George W. Bush administration, it's odd that this is the Democrats' position. That being said, what this sounds like to me is that Trump and his campaign were invited. That's not in dispute. They believe that they were told they could have a photographer. It looks like the video and the pictures that they put out were cell phones. And the question is, should it have immediately been campaign material? Or should they have given those photos to the Gold Star families and had them post them? That seems like what the issue is, although there does seem to have been a fight there. So I don't think anyone's going to think about this in 2 days. And it's obviously not going to be something that Kamala Harris is going to bring up during the debate, because the obvious comeback is, hey, say what you will about whether or not we should be taking photos. Where were you? It was your administration under which these people were killed. So I was there. Where were you? So I think this one's going to go away. Finally, we didn't have a blitz primary for the Democratic nomination. Kamala Harris got it pretty instantly. But we did have a Veep Stakes. And in that Veep Stakes, we had opposition research fly out from all sides on everybody that was involved, including Tim Walz, and we've been living in the Tim Walz world since, Josh Shapiro, who may or may not have been too lenient on a murder within his purview, before we get into any of the Jewish stuff. Mark Kelly, who apparently was too close to a Chinese company. And then Maryland Governor Wes Moore, along with Shapiro and Gretchen Whitmer, looked at as a rising star. If Kamala Harris loses, it'll be 2028 that you will hear these names quite a bit. He was tagged as falsely promoting himself as having a bronze star. And today, he admitted that he made a quote-unquote honest mistake for not correcting a claim on a 2006 White House fellowship application that he did receive said bronze star for his military service in Afghanistan, which he never received. The New York Times obtained the application and reported that Moore, then 27, included the award based on guidance from his deputy brigade commander, who had recommended him for the medal and confirmed its approval. However, Moore later learned that he had not received the Bronze Star, but, in his mind, failed to amend the application. Moore expressed regret for not correcting the error, noting that the commendation was mentioned during his gubernatorial campaign, though he never clarified that he hadn't received it. Whew. That was for the Veep Stakes, of at least when they were in the process of recruiting for a campaign that, wasn't a guarantee, still isn't a guarantee. That's how much Oppo got leaked inside the Democratic Party. Inside the Democratic Party. We didn't really talk about Tim Walz in the A block, so let me just get my thoughts out here. I thought he came off as really defensive. He was asked about not the stolen valor thing. He was asked about saying weapons of war, which is something that his campaign has already corrected. And then saying that his wife and he conceived their children via IVF when they did not conceive via IVF. He hand-waved both away by saying, my grammar's not the best. Don't love those answers. Don't love them. Because again, these are first impressions. And you are speaking to the converted. If you are not going to give an even-handed airing of these to people that have no idea what is going on and believe that Republicans can bring up things that might affect their vote in the same way that Democrats can bring up things that might affect their vote, then just saying, whatever, they criticize me for everything. Ugh. Not my favorite. Again, I don't think anybody's voting for Tim Walz. I think people are going to vote for either Kamala Harris or really Joe Biden. I mean, I think I said when the VP got announced that whoever was named was going to be the third most important person in the minds of a vote for or against the Democratic ticket, that in some order it's going to be Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, and then whoever the name was. It's Tim Walz now. So I still believe that. I also believe that you should head to takepoliticsseriously.com, sign up at the $3 level, get 2 bonus episodes each and every week, and they're always going to be me. It's gonna be me. TakePoliticsSeriously.com. And now, Musa Al-Gharbi. Despite the fact that I'm only days into being a father, and I swear I will take time off. I had one interview scheduled before I was supposed to not be here, and I had to do it just because this man has not been on the show in a while because he's been writing a book that is about to be out. We Have Never Been Woke. Our guest returning to the show, the great Musa Al-Gharbi. How you doing, buddy?
I'm great. It's great to be back.
Well, I'll tell you what, there's so much that I want to go over, but first let's talk about the book. Give us the broad strokes, the big pitch on We Have Never Been Woke.
So I guess the big question the book wants to ask is, basically since the 1980s, there's been this big shift in the global economy in favor of what you might call the knowledge industries. So people who work in tech and finance and academia and media and so on and so forth have a lot more wealth and influence over society than basically ever before. What's interesting is that people who work in these knowledge fields have basically always, from the beginning of these jobs, thought of themselves as champions for the marginalized and the disadvantaged, and like a lot of these professions are altruistic kind of by definition. So like journalists are supposed to speak truth to power and be voice for the voiceless, and academics are supposed to follow the truth wherever it leads without regard to whether it serves anyone's financial interests or political agendas and so on. Okay, so what you might expect is that as people like us have grown in power and influence over society, and since we are so committed to social justice on paper, we're the Americans who are most likely to self-identify as anti-racist, feminists, allies to LGBTQ people, environmentalists, and so on. Okay. So what you might expect is that as we have more power and resources under our control, that inequalities in America would be shrinking and a lot of social problems would be getting solved, and people would have a lot more faith and trust in institutions because of all the great work that we're doing for them.
Finally, the good guys are in charge.
Yes, absolutely. And what we've seen is actually the opposite of that. So we see increasing polarization and social strife, growing inequality, increasing mistrust of institutions, increasing institutional dysfunction. And so what the book is trying to figure out basically is what's going on here? Why do we see that? And so that's kind of the core puzzle that the book is trying to figure out.
I believe the first time that I came across your work and wanted to ask you to be on this show was looking at some of the work you had done in the 2016 election and trying to parse out these questions of what is the narrative that is fed by a Joe Biden win and who exactly pushed everybody over the finish line, and what is the reality of who actually voted for who. I want to make sure that we first, everybody encouraged, go pre-order the book. The book's out in October. There's going to be a link in the show notes. I'm going to say whether or not Musa will do it on Amazon, because the Amazon charts matter. It's a publishing world thing. Go do it there. Of course, we support your local bookstore. Buy another one there as well. The questions about this election, we have not talked since this election has really kicked up. The polling is crazy when it comes to racial realignment. The narratives around it have been fascinating. You now have Kamala Harris as the nominee. She's playing down the idea that she is either black or a woman. And Donald Trump is the one at the National Association of Black Journalists talking about the concept of when you are really black, I will say, is something that I've only heard exclusively within black communities previous to Donald Trump deciding to kind of mainstream it. What do you make of what has happened in this election, at least on terms of some of the studies that you had done from 2016?
Yeah, so it's a wild election to model from a social science standpoint. First, because even before, this big transition, it was already a super weird race. It had been like a century since we had a former president and a current president squaring off against each other. They were both super unpopular. They were both super old. One of them was a convicted felon who was twice impeached, and so it was just a crazy, even before this leadership change. But also, we haven't really had. It's been a very long time since we've had anything like this happen, where the nominee has dropped out this close to the race and someone else has stepped in to replace them. And Kamala is a really weird candidate for a lot of reasons as well, like a highly unusual candidate. So she would be the first female president if she won. She would be the second black president, the first black woman president if you want to get intersectional, also the first Asian president because she's of South Asian descent, and so on and so forth. But setting aside that kind of identitarian first business, she's also an unusual candidate for a lot of other reasons. And and so it's hard to, for social science, we're so far off the grid in terms of historical precedents and what to expect that it's hard to know what to make of it. In terms of the racial dynamics of the race, So one of the things that I've noted in my work for a while that people have been really, really, really hesitant to accept, but people are starting to accept now, although the narratives around it are still weird, is that for the last decade or so, basically starting after 2011 or so, non-white voters have been moving consistently away from the Democratic Party. And they've been increasingly alienated from the Democratic Party. And they haven't been moving towards third parties necessarily so much. They've actually been voting Republican. So they've been not only alienated from the Democrats, but actually voting Republican. Meanwhile, highly educated, relatively affluent white people have been increasingly aligning with the Democratic Party. And so if you look at 2020, for instance, Joe Biden did worse than Hillary Clinton did with black voters, with Hispanic voters, with black women included, and Hispanic women, with Asian voters. And the reason Biden was able to squeak out a win despite doing worse with minority voters than Clinton did was because of gains he made with white people, especially white men, especially highly educated white men. And that kind of narrative is basically the opposite of what everyone says.
I was reliably informed it was black women in Atlanta that solely won Joe Biden the White House in 2020.
Yeah, what's wild is if you do a deep dive into Atlanta, actually the more ethnically homogenous parts of Atlanta actually shifted the furthest towards the Republicans, and it's the wider diversifying area. So, Atlanta is a major knowledge economy hub, a major media hub. CNN's headquarters are there. You have major universities like Emory and other big universities there, and a lot of professionals who have been moving out of states like California because it's unaffordable, miserable, and so on, have been migrating to Sunbelt states and to Georgia and some cities in North Carolina and stuff like that. And so it's these professionals moving from states like California to states like Georgia that helped shift that helped flip Georgia into the other column. It was not black people. If you look at if you look at black voters in Georgia and in their trend lines, whether you look at men or women, they shifted towards the right. So if you want to thank someone for flipping Georgia and the election going the way it did, find a white professional somewhere and tip your hat to them.
Find a never Trumper. If you are a Biden supporter and you're very happy about it, then the next time you see a never Trumper, say thank you for your service, because they certainly delivered the goods for you in 2020 and may well do it again in 2024.
And 2022, you saw the same thing actually. Yeah. The Republicans held or increased their margins with minorities compared to 2020. And the reason, but you saw these greater defections from whites, especially whites who were increasingly alienated by Trump, relatively affluent, highly educated people, suburban people, urban people. And it makes sense that they would be alienated, right? These are the Americans who, if you look at why people vote and what they look for in a candidate, these are the voters who care the most about things like decorum and civility and the president being presidential and, following the correct protocols and respecting separation of powers and that kind of stuff. And Trump is not any of that, right? No. So if that's what you're looking for in a candidate, Trump's not your guy.
And this gets us back into the weirdness of this election. And it's so funny that you stated this from the scientific perspective of this is so abnormal, it's hard to find historical precedents that you could set against it, which makes you only believe like, okay, well, this is going to be the precedent that we will measure a bunch of stuff going forward on, just because it's so odd. But to that point, you're absolutely right. You have a lot of the my norms, never Trump kind of dispatch bulwark folks that very much have tilted to the Democratic side. And now you have the Democrats that are, pushing more than they have before into the idea of, ending the filibuster, criticizing the Supreme Court, and mainlining Twitter jokes about couch sex, which, was normally the thing that turned everybody off with Trump to begin with. The idea that there should be radical change and we need to take the gloves off.
Yeah. In both, what's wild here is kind of both. You see this movement on the Republican side too, right? So what used to make Trump, what made Trump appealing or popular in the last cycles was that he portrayed himself as a not conventional Republican in terms of his policy making, and he and someone who's also not going to just follow the polls and whatever, he was someone who said identitarianism was
That's fine. It's fine. You're allowed.
And so the same guy who's like identitarianism is we shouldn't lean into it is going, oh, is Kamala black enough though? Is she really the first black president? Right? Like it doesn't. The math doesn't match there.
It's crazy to me because stuff like that, it was exclusively the domain, at least for me in my media diet, for only black influencers on Instagram. Like that's pretty much the only place that I ever really heard anything like that of, the strata of who is really black and when you become black and any of that kind of purity testing.
Yeah.
And for Trump to do it, I don't know. I mean, I don't know where on the line. I certainly know it's abhorrent to everybody that you were just talking about in terms of the white suburban class. The idea of bringing up race in any way that is anything other than a laudatory element is verboten, right? So you don't want to do anything like that at all. But I don't even know. I mean, and certainly it's not a community that I have deep roots in. But like, I don't know whether that speaks to black voters, if there are, if there is some element of like, no, there is distrust with Kamala Harris for one reason or another.
There is actually, and so one thing that you can see, for instance, even going back to the 2020 primary election, Kamala Harris did really weak. She performed very weak with black voters. So black voters in the 2020 primaries typically gravitated towards Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren before they Kamala Harris consistently got around maybe 5% of the black vote throughout the 2020 primaries. And after the primary had concluded, Joe Biden had hoped that, had appointed Kamala as his VP, in part because he wanted to shore up his standing with non-white voters, especially non-white women voters. But he did worse with African Americans, including African American women. He did worse with Asians, including Asian women. So there's two lessons here. One of them is that the idea that if you just put someone of X group on the ticket, then X group will vote for you in higher numbers is just a silly way of understanding why people vote. Again, the people that the candidates that black voters gravitated towards in the primary were first Joe Biden and then Bernie Sanders and then Elizabeth Warren. So what they were concerned about is like, just like anyone else, what black voters were concerned about is like, what are your policies? What are you? They don't go, oh, a black person, well then I'll just vote for them. Who cares what they stand for? So first, that kind of identitarian calculus was just mistaken. And then the second lesson is just that Kamala Harris is consistently unpopular. She's just not someone who has a lot of cachet with black people. She never has. Her chief supporters have always been kind of affluent professionals who live in flyover cities. Who live in coastal cities like in California and in New York. Those have been her key supporters in terms of fundraising, and her key people in terms of activism, and so on and so forth. So she does have and I think part of it probably is true that at least part of the weakness that she has with black voters is because she's her father is Afro-Caribbean, Jamaican, and her mother is South Asian, and in a lot of knowledge economy spaces, we'd like to try to tamp down any discussion of difference there. But if you look at polling and surveys, there is a lot of evidence that black Americans, so native-born, monoracial, non-immigrant black Americans, people who are descendants of slaves, so on and so forth, actually don't necessarily view people of more recent immigrant background, even if they are dark-skinned, even if they're phenotypically black, they don't necessarily view them as black in the same way that they view people who share their closer cultural, ethnic, historical background. And so there is a difference there. It is something that black Americans do notice and care about as far as viewing someone as, are they one of us or not? But again, so that might be a little bit of a drag. But again, like the bigger point is, even if they did see Kamala as one of us or whatever, it's just not the case that black voters go, oh, you're one of us, so I'll just vote for you. I don't care what you stand for and what your policies are and what you're trying to do. I'll just vote for you because you're. That's just not how black voters think. That's not how any voters think, really. And so it's just a thing that's important to bear in mind.
You are an academic, which means you make your bread and butter looking at things after they happen as opposed to looking at them while they are happening. But I'd be curious, your perspective. You mentioned that Kamala Harris has historically been unpopular. She was unpopular as a presidential candidate. I will remark, only after 2 or 3 months where she was very popular and then became unpopular. And that's something that I do hope that people still keep in mind as we are watching this current cycle play out. But she became unpopular then. She was historically unpopular, below Joe Biden level approval ratings as a vice president. That is not the case now. She has seen a gigantic spike, not only in her popularity. Again, it's hard to model this against stuff that's happened in the past because this is so odd. But does anything pop into your mind of why this is happening?
Well, I think actually one thing that is important to bear in mind is that Kamala is definitely doing better than Joe Biden was during this cycle. So when they dropped Joe Biden and appointed Kamala instead, the Democrats' numbers went up substantially in a big way. But it's also important to bear in mind that Kamala is actually trending below where Joe Biden was trending at this point in 2020. And as Matt Yglesias and others have pointed out, so she's doing better than Joe Biden was in 2024, but she's doing worse than Joe Biden was last cycle when he went against Trump. And as Matt Yglesias and other political scientists and others have pointed out, if the polling error is that because she's underperforming Biden compared to last cycle, if the polling error from this cycle is the same as last cycle, she actually could be losing the election right now. The polling could actually be missing enough of the public sentiment that she's actually on path to lose the election. And she's also underperforming where Hillary Clinton was against Trump in 2016. So her numbers are actually are better than Biden's were before they dumped her, but they aren't actually extraordinary compared to previous Democratic candidates in the last several cycles. She's actually kind of lukewarm to maybe doing a little worse than Democrats have at this stage in the race in previous cycles. So that's something that she should be worried about, and that Democrats should be worried about. And Nate Silver actually recently, after the polling bump that she saw in the immediate transition and the convention, Nate Silver's updated estimate as of yesterday actually puts...
he flipped it.
Yeah, he thinks Kamala seems likely to win the popular vote but lose the Electoral College. But a lot can change. There's still 2 months out.
In this election, you never know what. I mean, look,
it's been total chaos.
There was a quaint moment not too long ago when a non-consecutive presidential term was something that we all found extraordinarily interesting, and that is now on the outside looking in, to use a college football ranking term. This is not even on the board of things that have been weird about this election.
I think the thing that people should take from Silver's analysis is not that, Kamala's going to lose. It's that we really have no idea.
Go. You're back on the show. I'm pumped. Let's go.
It's that we really have no idea what's going to happen over the next 2 months. This is going to be probably chaos all the way down. It'll be a nail-biter to the end. Anyone who's hoping, it's locked down, we're on the right side of history, we can just coast to an easy... Like, those people are... deluding themselves and could be in for a very rude awakening. I think people should bear in mind that this is still a very live race, even though Kamala is ahead in the national polling. And and then I'll note real quick.
Go.
Another thing that people should bear in mind, and that was a big source of hesitancy for a lot of Democratic insiders for having Kamala be the candidate at all, is that every institution that she's overseen has been kind of riven with extreme conflict and strife and massive turnover and lots of scandals. I wrote a piece about this for Unheard that's available on my website, but MusaAlGharbi.com. But so this created a lot of fear among Democrats. Like even as vice president, she had this higher levels of turnover than Trump.
90% turnover, and for people who do not, know, when you get a job in the vice president's office, that is a big resume builder. You want to show that you are somebody who can operate at that level in federal government. To leave those jobs is unusual at those levels, at the very least.
Yeah, and the kind of dysfunction and high turnover, it got so extreme that Joe Biden had to actually publicly address it, which is extremely unusual for the vice president's office. Like, mostly no one cares about the vice president. And so if the president has to take time to talk about the chaos that's unfolding within the vice president's, that's and so even her choice for running mate, she picked Tim Walz, in part, according to a number of campaign officials and other insiders, in part because Tim Walz was not going to be a diva or create problems. This was her big concern about her running mate, as anyone who tried to overshadow her, anyone who was really demanding, anyone who had too much of a backbone or ambition or something like that, it was going to be a problem, and she knew it because she can't. She has these interpersonal.
If I can point it out, this is something I said at the time, and I believe on at least one of my shows I have it on tape. The quote was, when Walz was selected, specifically over Josh Shapiro, who is somebody who is looked at as having a very bright future in the Democratic Party, the quote was, Walz during her interview with him said, "I don't want to be president. I just want to make sure that we are going to win this thing." To which point, my immediate reaction is, that man is a liar or she's stupid. Like, there's no politician on earth who gets that close to power and really means that if they were called, they would not serve as president. That is before any of the other stuff that's happened. But still, you're right. Whether it was Shapiro being looked at as too ambitious, there was an ad that came out from somebody else in Pennsylvania that mentioned, "I'm voting for Kamala Harris and Josh Shapiro," that might have been looked at as being a little bit too cart before the horsey. And if that's what you're doing now, what are you going to do in 3 months? Are we going to be looking at the co-president's label or anything like that?
Well, according to some accounts of the interviews that she had vetting the different candidates, when she asked Tim Walz, so first he said he has no ambitions on the presidency, and again, as you said, if the opportunity arose, I think it would be very tough.
Come on. We're talking about politics here.
But setting that aside, she asked questions like, do you want to be the last person in the room as when we're having big meetings and stuff? And he was like, whatever you want. If you want me to be in the room, I'll be in the room. If you don't want me in the room, like, he was just like, whatever you want. Whereas Shapiro was trying to set up a lot of conditions. He basically did want to be co-president. He wanted a whole bunch of duties that were specifically his. He wanted certain kinds of conditions for the kinds of fame or nodding or them appearing together, or him, again, being the last one in the room consulting on big issues. And so he really did want to be co-president in a way that is not compatible with. So Harris, even when she's not dealing with like A-type ambitious personalities like that, just run-of-the-mill people who work with her, she can't do that for very long without burning those people out and mistreating them and having scandals and toxic infighting. And so this is actually one thing to keep people's eye on as the race goes, because her 2020 primary campaign actually imploded. And so not only it collapsed in part because of, she just wasn't an effective candidate, but it also imploded due to like very dramatic infighting and scandals and all of this kind of stuff. And so a lot of Democratic insiders are just not sure, can she actually run a campaign? Can she hold it together without it turning into total chaos and scandal? And if she was in office, can she actually govern? Or is it going to be nonstop? And so she's it benefits her. It's to her benefit that she has this abridged primary thing, right? She got to skip the
primaries.
The primary, and there's just 2 months until the race. So she doesn't have a long 6 months or whatever to hold it together.
It was rollout, convention, debate, and then it's second start of the right and straight on till morning. Like we are right here. It is all full tilt boogie. To that point, I pointed this out in my Patreon episode yesterday. You're already seeing. You saw one Politico article where it was the same stuff from 2019. Anybody who followed that campaign, you got to be having Vietnam flashbacks. You are hearing the choppers in the distance when you start seeing, well, this person is blaming this person that the deal hasn't been done, and this person wants, because you're getting details. You're getting, well, Kamala wants Gayle King, but the Obama people want this person. It's like, when you're getting that means that people are getting really loose with the press, which is not what you want. And that's in tremendous relief to the campaign that through the last 2 cycles was that, which is the Trump campaign, where they, I said on the Patreon episode, the 2 names that you don't want to hear if you're rooting for either candidate, if you want Kamala Harris to be president, you do not want to hear her sister's name. You don't want to hear Maya's name, because that was the name that was mentioned the most when everything fell apart. If you're a Trump fan, you do not want to hear about Corey Lewandowski. He was apparently hired onto the campaign. We have no idea where. The only thing that is really impressive about Corey Lewandowski is his bedpost notches. I don't think he has a lot of electoral viability, but you haven't heard a lot about Corey Lewandowski. You're starting to hear more out of the Kamala Harris campaign, and I would say, from my perspective, that is anything that reminds you of 2019 for Kamala Harris. You want to get away from, because you're right. She has a short time to make a new impression.
Yeah, and there's a non-trivial chance that she could have another implosion or whatever on her hands. So this is a big question mark or variable. Is like, can she actually hold it together long enough to get through the election without major dysfunction and scandals? And so Tim Walz was part of that. People say, was it a mistake because Shapiro's was tied to Pennsylvania? And again, this is a state that she's actually been kind of tied in or losing. This is part of the reason why Nate Silver is projecting her to lose the Electoral College. And so people were thinking, well, it might have been a wise choice to appoint Shapiro, but actually if she appointed Shapiro, but then had lots of conflict and strife and infighting with him, that wouldn't have endeared her to the people of Pennsylvania or any other voters, right? And so it's it might have been a smart choice for her, given her needs as a candidate, to have some subordinate person who's just going to do what she wants and not be a diva. But on the flip side, on the other side of the ticket, also wildness. I mean, so Trump is an unapologetic drama queen who's
that's his brand, big messy drama,
who's being frustrated right now because all the attention is on Harris. He doesn't know how to really get himself back into the news cycle, and you can see he's like, both the fact that and his whole campaign had been banked on Joe Biden is old, old. Now Biden is out, and he's running to be the oldest president on record, and so Biden dropping out just totally like flipped his whole campaign strategy. He has not really a strong idea about what to do, even though Kamala has so many weaknesses. She has a lot of weaknesses as a candidate, but his campaign, he doesn't have a lot of discipline or focus, and his campaign doesn't appear to be super competent. So they're not really making good use of these vulnerabilities. But he and it seems like, it can happen sometimes where when someone is losing or they're under, they make the situation worse. They kind of psych themselves out. They are unable to, where they could turn it around if they were, again, if they just thought about it and whatever. But he seems like he's not able to do that right now. He's not in a headspace.
We call that lack of composure panic hiring Corey Lewandowski. Like that is the kind of decision you make when you are afraid that for whatever reason things are not going your way. I totally agree with you, and it's so fascinating to see. I mean, especially where we are media-wise. I'm sure we could probably have a whole nother hour-long conversation just focusing on the media side of this, but to watch normally, there was this blissful moment, man, after that CNN debate where everybody on television was actually just kind of honest with their real opinions, and you saw all of the people drop. The Republicans, look, they wanted to dump on Joe Biden. They were dumping on Joe Biden before, but now they were being agreed with the David Axelrods, who were like, yeah, that was terrible. That was awful. Trump was also bad, but this was terrible. And then, the orders came back in, and now we're back to everybody singing from the appropriate hymnals as the segments move on. But I don't even know what people are watching. I don't know what people are listening to. I had this moment yesterday on Twitter where, the Kamala Harris campaign, like the Biden campaign before them, has pushed the idea of Project 2025, the Heritage Foundation thing. And they say that it's going to ban abortion nationwide. It's going to ban IVF. Donald Trump comes out yesterday and says he wants public funding for IVF, right? Yeah. So now we're not even in a world where you can debate that issue. If Trump is out publicly saying, I want public funding for intravirtual fertilization, and the other side is saying, no, he wants to ban it, then where do you even have a conversation? Where is even the discussion of the merits of either of those issues?
Yeah, well, and you know what's funny to me is I think this is a place where, so one way that Trump could solve this whole problem that he has is if he was just honest with voters about who he is as a leader, as a person, or whatever, in the sense that Trump doesn't read things. He doesn't read things. He did not read Project 2025.
No.
He did not sit there and go with a bunch of experts and he. Not only did he not read this particular document, he doesn't read and this doesn't. But he has this thing where he wants to try to compete with people like Kamala Harris or whoever as being kind of their equal in the kind of technocratic sphere for some reason as well. So for instance, you see things like he keeps saying that he read J.D. Vance's book, but then describes the book as the opposite. So he keeps saying, oh, yeah, Vance wrote this book that's about how hardworking Americans don't get a shot. Like the Hillbilly Elegy is all about how actually America is a place where if you work hard and you dedicate yourself, you actually can make progress and get by.
Yeah.
And that the reason why those people are not succeeding is because those people are a bunch of lazy, entitled, grievance-mongery people who sit around asking for government handouts. Unlike him, who joined the military and got his life together and whatever. So Hillbilly Elegy, and this is why it was popular with liberals at the time, why it became a New York Times bestseller.
Got a movie made. Got an Oscar now.
Got a movie made. Is because it was a book that affirmed liberals' prejudices about those people.
Yeah.
And so for Trump to describe that book as being about how hardworking people just aren't given a fair shot and whatever, shows that he has never read this book. He's never read this book in his life. He has no idea what it says. But so he does this. He keeps trying to present himself as someone who's policy literate, who reads, and so on and so forth. And this actually is part of what creates this opportunity for Democrats to tie him to something like Project 2025. When he's like, I never read this. I'm not into this. I don't like. If he just leaned into who he is as a human being.
Well, but even then, it's like, he says stuff like that. It's just it's on the right. Project 2025 doesn't mean anything unless you are like a hardcore Heritage Foundation person.
Yeah.
Nobody on the right cares about Project 2025. The left, as evidenced by the gigantic prop Gallagher book that they kept bringing out on stage during the convention, very much believes in it. I was joking. I brought a TV into my office where I have the 4 major cable networks on going all the time. The last time I saw a television program talk about a book that much as MSNBC talks about Project 2025 is the 700 Club talking about the Bible. It is a constant staple of that programming. But for them, they don't want anybody to read it either. Yeah. They just want to say there's a Necronomicon. It has all the evil spells in it. Donald Trump did not have it last time. He has it now. He will rain untold terror upon the lands if he is allowed to read the profane scripture from the White House.
They're basically banking on the fact that most Americans are not going to be reading this dense right-wing policy document produced by a conservative think tank. And instead, they'll just take
everybody's word for it. Yeah, because Democrats want a reason to believe that Donald Trump is uniquely dangerous, as they have in 2016, as they did in 2020, and Republicans want to believe that the left-wing establishment is going to ruin America, and we live. The Venn diagram, I feel like, has totally separated. We are now looking at like two distant planets, and then maybe like a few orbiting satellites that can bring messages between them. But that's the biggest thing about charting this election is that I just don't even know. I don't know what curious partisans on the inside of those Venn diagram voters are reading, let alone whoever is in the middle that's actually undecided. The 100,000 people in the Rust Belt and the Sun Belt that are going to decide this election. I've been joking recently that for all we know, the gathering of the Juggalos, the Insane Clown Posse convention, might be the most important political meeting place for this election, because that seems like the kind of totally outside the box, low propensity voter that both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump should be putting on grease paint on and spraying Faygo for to earn their vote.
I'll say that's my America.
There we go.
Well, okay, so one of the ways in which politics has actually changed dramatically, actually, over the last decade or so, is that it used to be the case that Democrats benefited from high turnout because low propensity voters, non-white voters, lower income voters, so on and so forth, used to vote for the Democratic Party, but they didn't turn out much. So when you had midterm races that didn't have high turnout, Republicans would do a lot better. And when you had big races that brought a lot of people to the ballots, the Democrats would overperform. Okay, that's been flipped on its head now, because a lot of these lower propensity voters, people who are lower income, who are less educated, who are in less urban areas, who are non-whites, religious minorities, and so on. They've actually been moving consistently for a decade now to the Republican Party. And so it's now the case that Democrats are overperforming in special elections and midterms and races with lower turnout. And it would behoove someone like Trump or Republicans in general to actually push for higher turnout. Now, this is at odds with their strategy as a party, because for decades they've been trying to suppress turnout, limit voting, create voting restrictions and difficulties. Trump in 2020 was trying to disparage people voting by mail and other things like this, which could have very well cost him the election by suppressing turnout from certain low propensity voters.
I subscribe to that theory.
And this is actually I think an error that Trump is making politically is that what he should be trying to do is inspire. If you create a lesser of two evils race where you're saying, where one party is saying this guy is terrible and the other party is saying this lady is terrible, then a lot of low propensity voters just go, okay, I'm not going to vote for either of them. I'll come up with something else to do on Tuesday. Yeah. And so if what he should be doing is trying to actually tell people, why should you vote for me? Why do you want me in the White House? Not why do you, the radical Democrats, Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. And then on the flip side, the Democrats' mistake in a way is, with this focus on 2025 and whatever, is that trying to paint Trump as someone who would be a fascist, totalitarian dictator, whatever, if he got in office, doesn't resonate as well as it used to, in part because he's been in office before. We had 4 years where he was in office, and for most of that time, the only difference that most Americans noticed between Trump taking over and Obama taking over, most of the economic trend lines just continued on the same path that they were on. Yeah. The institutions just kept chugging along. The only difference that most normie Americans would have noticed from Obama's time to Trump's time was that people like us, knowledge economy professionals and stuff, spent that last 4 years solid, going all day, every day, freaking out, tearing our hair out.
Yeah.
That said, after he lost the election, he was trying in inappropriate ways to stay in office. I mean, people shouldn't be complacent about but the fact that they had 4 years with Trump, institutions continued to function. The sky did not fall down. America was not overrun by whatever the dangerous threat that America would be overrun with if you had this unprepared person in office. And the truth is, and part of the reason that didn't happen is because the truth is, it actually doesn't matter that much. If people overestimate how much it matters who the president is. There was a lot of continuity between Obama and Bush. There was a lot of continuity between Obama and Trump. There would be a lot of there's a lot of continuity between Trump and Biden, and so on and so forth. For the most part. So I think to the extent that Democrats are trying to present Trump as some kind of dangerous fascist or whatever. My personal view is that Trump is not fit for office, as he showed when he refused to step down or whatever, is my personal view as a citizen. But my view as a social scientist is that that's not likely to resonate, because people do have, he does have a record where he was in office for 4 years. He did leave office at the end, even if he didn't want to. And it wasn't 4 years of a fascist coup or whatever. So, so I think, again, it would behoove Kamala Harris and the Democrats to also try to convince people about why they should vote for her, or assuage their concerns about who she is as a candidate or what she stands for. People don't really know. She's, as you said, they spend all the time talking about Project 2025 and not so much about their own Project 2025. What is their project for 2025? Who knows?
It's it's like the Seinfeld Kramer plot where he's the movie phone guy and he can't tell what people are pressing, and it's just like, well, why don't you just tell me what policies you'd like?
Absolutely.
And that's, we saw that. I will have already done my thing on her CNN interview last night, but it's fascinating to see how they are trying to get around what her 2019 campaign was, and the way I would describe this election from either side strategically is that Donald Trump wants this to be a referendum on the last 4 years. Economy good, now economy bad. There was not a world at war, now world at war. Would you like more like before or more like now? If more like before, vote Trump. That is the simple way that they want this conversation to go. For Kamala Harris, and as she put it last night, she wants to turn the page on the last 10 years of divisive politics, which I don't know exactly whether or not that was an ad-lib. I don't think there was much ad-libbed in that. I think that this was all kind of focus tested, but that would include 2 years of Obama, 4 years of Trump, and 3.5 years of Biden, of which Biden would have been in office more than Trump was if this is, during all that. And so she wants to say, let's get done with Trump. That's what you really want. He is historically unpopular. He can't get over 48% no matter what. There are just independents that have closed the door on that, and they did it years ago. So we'll see who can prove what, but it's... Man, I'll tell you what, I'm glad that you're out of book mode and now you are talking again during this election, because I definitely want to have you on at least one more time closer to the book launching, which of course is We Have Never Been Woke by Musa Al-Gharbi. Please go and pre-order it right now. We have the show notes, a link down there for you, but do it on Amazon. Again, the Amazon charts matter. It matters on Amazon. Musa, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. And I'll give you 5% commission on that.
And that'll wrap it up for us today. Politics, written and hosted by me, Justin Robert Young, for Dog and Pony Show Audio in Austin, Texas. TheYoungAmerican@gmail.com is where you need to go to email the show. If you have any thoughts on the show, I always read the emails. You can find social clips of this show, Justin R. Young on TikTok, Justin R. Young on Instagram, Justin R. Young on Twitter, and our YouTube show where our full-form video programs exist is youtube.com/politics. If you want the audio version, it is px3podcast.com. Of course, as always, letter P, letter X, number 3, podcast.com. You can support us with a one-time donation, paypal.me/payjury, PAYJURY. Venmo is Justin-Young-20. Cash App is PX3Cash. And you can send anything you'd like in the mail. Post Office Box 153184. Austin, Texas, 78715. Of course, you can always get our bonus content at takepoliticsseriously.com. $3 tier gets you 2 bonus podcasts each and every week covering all the news we miss on our free podcasting schedule. And our $10 tier gets your name read at the end of the show like these fine folks in the Titanic. $10 tier. Adam, Dr. Whiskey, CP, Sean, David, Nicholas, Whiskey Wolf, Sparky from Stevens, Florida, Will Porta, Vote Tony's PJs from New York, Devon, the CFP, Gloria, Grayzone, Peepaw, Jay, Marcus with a Q, DP4 Bongo, Sam, John, Niemeister, Edwin, and Vote Gloria Young for King of the New World Order, Edison, Jeremy, a dog named Checkers, Sarah Jeannie, Matthew, Dr. G, Neil, His Nerdiness Charles, Audrey, Stoll Adler's Spot, Darren, Idris Arslanian, Bluefriend and the Lenina, Berkeley Steven, Chad, Zombie Doc, Matt, Chill, Adam, Chief Andy, Robert, Casey, Paul, Dustin, Brad, D-Laser, Nick, Just Another Pilot, Middle Age, Mike, Utah, Jimmy Montana, The Jen, Alo, Craig, D. Reilly, and Andrew. You want your name on the show? One place to do it. Take politics seriously.com. And that's it for this week. One episode, and it came out on Friday night. First time that I've not done 2 episodes in a week in a very long time, but I feel like I had a good excuse for it. We'll get the little wiggly bean up here on camera and on mic pretty soon, but just to get a little sappy. I never would have imagined that you guys could make this possible, to bring a life into this world. You have. And I will always, always owe you for it. Not as much as her, but close. Till next time, this is your old pal Justin Robert Young saying, some shows talk about politics, others talk about politics, and still more discuss politics, but this is the only show that dares discuss all 3.